Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house. But it did not fall because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Now, when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Good morning, church. My name is Trey. I'm the teaching pastor here. I never know where this thing can go. It's a joy to be with you. As I was working on this sermon this week, I was thinking it's been about 6 months since I started here as the teaching pastor. And it's been great, but I feel like I haven't done enough teaching. As far as I get up here and I preach, but my job is teaching pastor. So you're gonna have to bear with me this morning because we're gonna go through some boring stuff. So in his seminal work titled "A Secular Age," a philosopher named Charles Taylor, he sets out to trace the philosophical and historical movement from the sort of monoculture, homogeneous societies of Western Europe, right? If you think about it, if you lived in France in the 1500s, everyone looked like you, everyone spoke the same language, everyone went to the same church. Right? That's period. Okay? And so he's trying to trace the movement, the historical and philosophical movement from that to our modern world today, in which there are a multitude of different belief systems. There are a multitude of different opinions about any idea, right? There's been this, what he calls this Nova effect, right? This explosion of ideas. And so his goal is to trace that and trace the sort of ideas that go along with it and the consequences of it. Now, it's important to note, he does not say this is a bad thing. He does not give judgment to this. He just is wanting to see what caused this and how does it affect us, right? One of the obvious effects that he talks about is how the idea of certitude, of being certain about anything, has eroded over that time, right? It was very easy to be certain in your beliefs when everyone you knew believed the exact same thing. It was all you had ever heard about, and the only person who didn't believe it was the town drunk, right? That nobody wanted to be like. It was very easy to say, I am certain about this. It's much harder to say that when you live in a place in which there are 1,000 different versions of your belief system, and the best person you know is an atheist, right? It's a difficult thing to have certainty in, have a certitude about, right? And so Charles Taylor, he traces this idea and he shows how in this process, different philosophies were developed that allowed us to find significance and meaning outside of historical paths, right? In the medieval times, there was one way to find significance, and it was through the sort of traditional path of religion and family and your community, period, right? And now there are a host of ways to find significance and meaning. You can find your meaning in one part of being human, right? Just your job, or just your sexuality, or just your politics, and you can root your whole identity and meaning in that. Right? And there's 1,000 different versions of that we go through. And so he traces this idea, he traces this explosion of options that happened. And he really traces how through the 1900s, you just get this multitude of different ways to find meaning, and they just continue to sprout new paths and new paths and new paths, right? However, I love Charles Taylor. I think he is absolutely brilliant. I don't think that even Charles Taylor, when he was writing this in the 90s, saw or foresaw the explosion of beliefs that we are experiencing now. I don't think that Charles Taylor, when he was looking at this historical pattern and looking forward to how this was going to develop, I don't think Charles Taylor said, hey, in a matter of 10, 15 years, people are going to be finding significance and meaning in the argument that the world is flat. I just don't think he foresaw that. I don't think he foresaw that there was going to be a huge explosion of online sources that would drive someone to find their meaning and significance in a single pop star with blonde hair. I'm not going to say who, with blonde hair, and there was going to be this whole homogeneous culture surrounded around this identity where anything this person says or does is suddenly good and perfect. I don't think Charles Taylor saw that coming, right? But it's the world in which we live. There is a constant static, a constant hum of noise around us at all times, assaulting us with opinions and ideas and advice and ways to find meaning and significance, with interpretations of events happening around us everywhere, all the time, right? And it's just nonstop. Every time. You could grab your phone right now and scroll forever and never get to the end of these ideas, right? Of this noise, this static, right? Different views on everything. Different views on politics, different views on parenting, different views on Jesus, different views on church, different views on culture, right? And the thing is it's not even like sensible, right? It's all sort of extreme because of the way we've set up our culture, right? Like you'll be scrolling through and you have like the person who makes their living being the like organic granola mom who says that you should only feed your kids like mushed up bean sprouts, right? And there's no, like it has to be extreme. That has to be everything that person is about. Right? There's no place in that for her to be like, yeah, sometimes if you're running late, just grab a Happy Meal, right? There's no place for that. Or if you're the online like alpha male, like strong man guy, there's no room for you to be like, sometimes you need to cry, right? And this is the problem. Not only do we have this constant static that makes it so hard for us to sit and find clarity at all, but all of this static is in one way self-seeking, right? It's not in good faith. People are making their livelihood on you paying attention, so they're gonna do whatever they think will get you to do that, right? People are trying to make a profit, and so it behooves them to be extreme, right? And everywhere we look, we can see these people lying to us, right? From influencers online. I remember a couple years ago, there was this dude called the Liver King who just fascinated me because it was so absurd, right? He's this online influencer that's like, we need to live like a sort of a certain lifestyle where we eat raw liver and like raw meat and like blah, and he was this jacked dude, right? And then of course, because if you looked at him, of course it turns out he was doing all the steroids. Right? Like, because of course he was. Like, no, that's no alternative, right? But still, he's feeding you this idea, right? Over and over again, we find this from our influencers and even from places we thought we could trust, right? Our news sources, right? Everywhere you look, you have people getting on TV and telling you the 2020 election was rigged, and then getting off and texting their friend like, this isn't happening, right? And then likewise getting on TV and being like, Trump's in collusion with Russia, and then texting their friends and be like, are we really doing this? Are we still talking? Like, what is happening? I mean, they're just lying to us because it gets us to watch. Everywhere we go, we have this culture that is all about people screaming at you, follow me. Follow me on TikTok. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. Follow. Keep your eyes and attention on me because that way I can become rich. And I'll tell you anything that might give you meaning in order to do that. How do we know what to do in the midst of that constant static of follow me? Where do we go? How do we survive and navigate our life with all that noise? And in the midst of all this noise is Jesus. In the Gospel of Matthew begins with sort of the opening ideas around Jesus, his birth, his baptism, his temptation. And then in chapter 4, he kind of sketches what Jesus' ministry is all about, right? It shows how Jesus began his ministry, what Jesus does, and then it goes into his teaching. In chapter 4, verse 18, it says this: "As he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who was called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, 'Follow me, and I will make you fish for people.' Immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went from there, he saw two brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, in the boat with their father Zebedee, mending their nets, and he called them. And immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him." Jesus begins his ministry the way all influencers begin their journey, saying, "Follow me," right? I imagine Jesus walking amongst us today, and our heads are down, looking at our phones, and we have ear pods in, and Jesus says, "Follow me," and we're just like, I can't hear it. There's 1,000 people telling me to follow them right now. This is just one of the various options. This is that secularization that Charles Taylor talks about. This idea that there's 1,000 people saying, "Follow me," 1,000 options. How do we hear Jesus in that static? And then how do we heed Jesus in that static, right? Our theme this year is on flourishing. And if we want to flourish, we have to find a voice that we can follow, right? We have to find a way, a life that leads us toward flourishing. And I don't think we're going to find that on Instagram. I just really don't. We must look to Jesus and look intently at Jesus. And this is what we're going to do this year. We're going to spend the majority of this year just looking at Jesus and how Jesus comes to bring life and life to the fullest. So in the Gospel of Matthew, we begin with Jesus' call to follow, right? And then Jesus goes about doing the stuff, right? Vineyard people, we know this term, right? It says this in Matthew chapter 4, verse 23. So this is immediately after him calling people to follow. He says, "He went throughout all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria. And they brought him all the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, those having seizures and paralytics, and he healed them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee and the Decapolis, and from Jerusalem and Judea and from beyond the Jordan." So Jesus calls people to follow him, and then he does what he does, right? He goes around and he does the stuff. He cares for the hurting. He heals the sick. He casts out the demons. He does the stuff that Jesus does. And then in chapter 5, we get into this long section of Jesus' teaching. We call it the Sermon on the Mount, right? And between these sections, what Matthew is giving us at the very beginning of his gospel is a snapshot of all that Jesus did. Just saying, hey, if you want to know who this Jesus guy is, this is what he did. He called people to follow. He ministered, he healed, he cared for, and he taught. Right? And the Sermon on the Mount is one of those seminal collections of teachings. Augustine called it the perfect standard of Christian life. John Calvin called it a summation of all that Jesus taught, right? So this Sermon on the Mount, it gives this scattering of teachings of Jesus's that sort of give a representation of what it was that Jesus taught. So if you want to know who Jesus is, what Jesus said, the Sermon on the Mount is a great place to go and just say, hey, these are the ideas. If you're not into them, you're probably not going to be interested in reading further, right? There's not going to be much else there that's going to surprise you, right? And so Jesus does. So he calls people to follow. He does the stuff of ministry, and he goes up on a mountain like a teacher that we might previously know named Moses, right? And he teaches the people about God, right? He gives this authoritative teaching. And this teaching asks one simple question, one haunting question. Will you follow me? There are a lot of claims of how to follow Jesus, but the Sermon on the Mount aims to say, will you listen and follow? Will you do what I'm actually saying, right? Matthew chapter 5, verse 1 and 2, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him, and then he began to speak and taught them, saying, Jesus brings them to the mountain, has them sit down, Jesus invites them to be students, right? And he says, here, let me teach you how you are to live, right? Let me teach you what my message is. And Jesus ends the Sermon on the Mount with this call of what are we supposed to do with all this teaching, right? So we're actually going to begin at the end. In chapter 7, he says this, everyone then who hears these words, which words? The Sermon on the Mount, the ones that he just said, right? Not the ones that we hear on social media, not the ones that are constant, but what words? They're right here. Sometimes we confuse Jesus so easily, right? We think, how am I supposed to know who Jesus is? How am I supposed to know what I'm supposed to read the words, right? You don't ultimately need Kelly or I to tell you who Jesus was. Read the words. They're right here. You don't need that Christian influencer to tell you, how do I be a Christian woman in a suburb in the modern age whose hair is brown, right? I feel like we've gotten that particular, and then we find an influencer that matches exactly that, and we say, oh, this person's going to tell me what Jesus... Don't just... Everyone then who hears these words of mine, just the words, go there, and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Jesus is asking the simple question that everyone is asking: will you follow me? And just like any influencer, they don't just want you to listen, they want you to act on that. They want you to put what they're saying into action, to buy whatever it is they're selling, to do whatever it is they're telling you to do, to believe whatever it is they're telling you to believe. And Jesus says, if you hear these words of mine and act on them, that's what this being a Christian thing is, right? When you ask, what does it mean to be a Christian? It means hearing the words of Jesus and then doing them, right? Sometimes we wonder why we can't hear Jesus, why we don't know what to do, right? And it's often one of two things. Number one, it's too loud. There's too many things telling you what to do. Or two, we're not listening, right? This analogy of Jesus being the teacher and his disciples being the students works really well for me as a teacher, right? Because I give tests to students, and sometimes students don't do very well. And when you go to talk to them about it, they seem very confused at why that is. They're like, I don't know, Mr. Allen. I felt really confident. I felt good about it. And I'll be like, okay, did you study? No. Did you read the book? Nope. I don't even know what book it was on, right? But I really thought I was going to do well, right? And it's like, okay, well, I have an idea of where the problem started, right? But we can do this in our own lives. We can be sitting there and be like, how do I live in this situation? What do I do? And we're just like, I don't know. I guess I'll just make it up. Or I guess I'll just go online and scroll until someone answers the question, right? Who are we following? Whose words are we heeding? What noise is the loudest? What noise is the loudest? If you are my age and have been in ministry for a while, like Kelly has, like Brian has, you've seen this move of, because if you look, there's that, you can trace it in sort of ratings, right? In the 90s to 2000s, 24/7 news was a thing. But in about 2010, the ratings spiked. People started not just watching the news once a night, but having it on at all times, right? And you watched, if you were in ministry, you watched as people became more and more radicalized in different directions. You could see it happening. And oftentimes they would even notice it in themselves. They'd be like, I don't know, I'm just angry all the time. And I'd be like, well, what are you listening to all the time? And it's like, oh, angry people rant on TV. Oh, I don't know, man, maybe, right? It's hard. It's hard because the solution is simple and therefore sounds sort of unbelievable or childish. The answer is turn it off. The answer is turn it off, right? Unfortunately, there's not a plug to the internet and fortunately for you, I'm not in charge of it because I would pull that thing so fast. I'd say, hey, let's go back 100 years and let's rebuild. You know what I mean? Let's try. Do something. At least the way we've built the internet today is not the way it's supposed to be, right? Maybe we should rebuild that. There's too much noise. How do we hear? And the answer is simple, turn it off, right? But it's not that simple, right? We're all addicted to the internet. We're all addicted to our phones. And addiction's not a light thing. It's not an easy thing, trust me. It's not a simple thing. And so how do we do this? How do we, in a modern world where we live in a secular age, where there's 1,000 different options for us to follow, 1,000 different ways to find significance, what does it look like to hear the words of Jesus and act on them? How do we become the wise who build their house on the rock? And the answer is, listen, hear, try to turn down the volume, right? And it can start very simply, right? We want to do a communal practice. I think I have a slide over the next couple of weeks while we're in this. We want to invite you all to join us in spending a little bit of time each day trying to turn down the volume on the other voices and to hear the words of Jesus. So what I want to invite us to do is to twice per day. I put it in morning and evening. That's sort of the traditional Christian times of doing this. But if the time doesn't work for you, find a different time. The idea is that we would together as a church spend a couple of moments each day reflecting on the words of Jesus. And we're going to do it all from the Sermon on the Mount, right? I love this idea of us all waking up tomorrow morning and reading the Beatitudes. And we're not going to be with each other, but we're all together, right? And then if you run into someone at Costco, I run into Tony almost every time I go to Costco. And so I can be like, hey, how were the Beatitudes this morning, right? And we can talk about it, right? And so take a picture of this. I think we'll try and get someone who can make it prettier, send it out to everyone, because I just did it on a Word document. I was like, this is good enough for me. So take a picture of this. We'll try and send it out, but let's try and spend a little bit of time, 2 times per day, reflecting on the words of Jesus, sitting in quiet, turning off the phone, taking out the headphones, and doing it in quiet. What might this look like? Well, we all live drastically different lives. So it's going to look different for all of us. This may be reading it before you get in your car for your commute, turning everything off, and just listening, hearing it over and over again as you drive for 5, 10, 15 minutes. It may look like you finally get the toddler down for a nap, and you can't sit down, right? Because of course you can't. But you just read it and then fold some laundry in quiet and just let Jesus' words wash over you. This can look a lot of different ways. If you have a moment to sit and be quiet, it would look like sitting, taking a few deep breaths, hearing the words once, twice, 3 times, and just letting Jesus' voice come over that constant hum. So let's try this. Let's together practice what this might look like. So, if you will, if you can, I want you to sit with both feet on the ground, root yourself in this place, get comfortable, lean back into your chair, whatever is going to feel the most comfortable where you don't have to think much about how you're sitting or whatever. Close your eyes. Let's just take a couple of deep breaths. rooting ourselves in place, telling ourselves it's okay that it's quiet. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And as we sit in the quiet, we prayerfully ask and think about what words jumped out to us. What caught our brain? What made us feel something? And spend some time asking, thinking, reflecting on those words of Jesus and what they might mean. Maybe you had just gotten done scrolling on your phone and the phrase, "Blessed are the meek," stuck out as contrasting something you just heard. Spend some time praying and saying, Jesus, help me hear your voice above the voices who tell us that only the strong, only those who abuse others, only those who grasp will inherit anything. And then if there's time, come back to the text and read it again. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Jesus, in this loud world we live in, help us to find moments of quiet so that when you walk by, we will hear you call us to follow. Lord, help us turn down the volume so that we can hear your voice above all. Help us to give credence to your voice above all others, that we might hear your words and act on them, that we might not fall into the easy trap of building our house on sand and then having to live through it falling, through it crumbling, and the pain and the hurt of that. Help us to build our lives upon that sure foundation of your word, that for thousands of years people have found to be trustworthy, to be safe, to be a true guide, to be all that is needed for life and salvation. Help us here, the people in this room, the Vineyard Church of Sugarland, Stafford, not fall for the traps and disingenuous interpretations of who you are, but let us be people who go to your word and sit at your feet and listen and be formed and act upon what you do. Help us be people who do the stuff, who see you live your life, and we follow. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.